The Giants get their backup quarterback. Who is it? What does it mean? And how is it shaping things up for the draft? We're going to cover all that on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Really appreciate it. And a special shout out to all the new subscribers, listeners, watchers on YouTube that have hopped on board. Really appreciate everybody who has written in, who has commented, and most of all, who watches the show or listens to the show on a regular basis. Really appreciate you guys. I can't tell you how much. But anyway, we got a lot to cover today. Just real quick, I had planned to do the Twitter mailbag today. I have it recorded, folks. It's edited. It's all ready to go. But you know what? We've got to stick with the current stuff. We got to stick with what's breaking, and that is the latest Giants news as they go through free agency. Now, free agency officially begins today, Wednesday, at 12 noon Eastern time. And that's when all these reported signings that you've heard over the last couple of days will become official. So the one we need to talk about today is the Giants signing a backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. Now, Tyrod Taylor, interestingly, I think I might have mentioned him in passing. I know I was beating the drum more so for Marcus Mariota, obviously not in the cards there, but on Giants country, my writer Steven actually mentioned Tyrod Taylor as a possibility, and kudos to him for getting that right. But let's talk about this transaction, what it means, what our expectations are, and above all, we'll go back and we'll look at the transactions the Giants have made or are about to make official as of, like I said, noon on Wednesday, and how this is setting up their draft for next month. All right, so let's start with Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor, for those who don't know, 6th-round draft pick in, I believe it was 2011 for the Baltimore Ravens. 53 starts in 78 games. He has a 26-25-1 record as a starter. And I believe he was 2-4 last year with the Houston Texans, stepping in for Deshaun Watson. So Taylor checks off one of the boxes I know that I spoke about, the backup quarterback needing to have. And that was a decent, a record of at least 500, if not a winning record, which he does have. Now, Tyrod Taylor also has a connection to Buffalo, not so much to Brian Daboll, because Taylor, when he was in Buffalo, he was there from 2015 to 2017. Daboll didn't come on board until 2018, so he missed Daboll, but he was there. Tyrod Taylor was there for the first year of Joe Schoen when he was brought on board by Brandon Beane to be the assistant general manager. And in 2017, Tyrod Taylor brought the Buffalo Bills to their first playoff berth, I believe, in 17 seasons. So he's got a little bit of a history there with Joe Schoen. So anyway, he's now moving on to the Giants, and the contract is reportedly 2 years, up to $17 million, with $8.5 million guaranteed money. All right. Now it's actually more of a 2-year, $11 million deal, with incentives that can push it as high as $17 million. And some of the incentives, as I understand it, include games won. It includes, obviously, percentage of snaps played and that sort of thing. So the Giants looking to upgrade their backup quarterback situation, which last year, I don't have to tell you guys and gals, it was a mess last year. And even though the Giants signed Davis Webb earlier in the year, that was more or less, I think, a move to help with the teaching of the offense that Brian Daboll is going to be installing. That offense is expected to take on a very heavy buffalo flavor, if you will, with a little bit of Kansas City sprinkled in, a little bit of what maybe Daniel Jones likes to do. And but overall, it's probably going to be a heavy buffalo flavor. All right. So, what does the signing of Tyrod Taylor mean for the Giants moving forward? Because look, let's face it, that's a lot of money. All right. It averages out. So let's go with the low end, 11 million. So 11 million over 2 years, that's almost, that's a hair under 6 million per year, APY, average per year. That's a lot. All right. For a backup quarterback. Now, I was initially projecting the backup quarterback to get anywhere from about 3.5 to 4, with incentives to maybe push it as high as 5 to 5.5. So that being said, what does this mean for Daniel Jones? Why did Tyrod Taylor potentially get as much money as he did with the incentives that can increase the offerings even further? Well, there are a few possibilities. Obviously, the first one we have to talk about is the status of Daniel Jones's health. He is recovering from the sprained neck, which prematurely ended his season last year. And we don't know. I mean, as of the last update, which came at the combine, Daniel Jones was still on the mend. I do not believe as of the combine he had been cleared for contact yet, but he really doesn't need to be cleared for contact until training camp, until, the preseason, and late in the preseason at that. Ideally, you'd like to get him into some preseason games if possible, but until he's cleared for contact, he's not going to see the field. He'll be able to practice and lift and do all the stuff he needs to do to get ready. But see, here's the concern now. The concern is that, Daniel Jones, if he is not cleared medically for contact, how's he going to, come along in this new offense that's being installed? He's going to be able to practice it, but as we have seen so many times, practice and game snaps, not quite the same thing. So a little bit of a concern there, I'm sure. Okay, now that said, the expectation is that Daniel Jones will enter training camp as quarterback number 1. But as I have said on this program, and as I have said on Giants Country, it would behoove the Giants to give Daniel Jones a little bit of a push. All right. He has not had much of a push, if any of a push, since being named the starting quarterback of this team in 2019. And I believe that has been a mistake. All right. Now, I get it. Daniel Jones is the 6th overall pick of the 2019 draft. You would think that he'd be ready to rock and roll. He wouldn't need the competition and so on and so forth. But what we have seen from the games that Daniel Jones has played is he has been progressing at a snail's pace. Now, not all of that is his fault. Let's make that clear. No stability in the coaching, didn't really have a lot of great playmakers around him. The offensive line has been an absolute disaster. So, not all that's Daniel's fault. What does concern me with Daniel, and I have to wonder if maybe this came up when Brian Dable and Joe Shane were watching film of Daniel, which, remember, they did, back at the time, just to backtrack a little bit here, when they were both introduced at their respective introductory press conferences, that you're talking, that was like around late January. They had not really dived into the film of any of the players, let alone Daniel Jones. So naturally, when they were asked questions about Daniel, they were optimistic. They said all the right things. They have since had plenty of time to sit down and watch the film of Daniel Jones, along with, the quarterback coach, along with the offensive coordinator and the rest of the staff. All right, now, the biggest thing that I would think would be of concern is that Daniel Jones last year, in year 2, still didn't take the big leap in terms of mental processing. All right, now, that is not, folks, related to the offensive line play. That is not related to the drops. That is not related to the skill position players. That is a matter of the quarterback dropping back and trusting what he sees if his first read is not available. And all too often in year 2 of Jason Garrett's system last year, we saw instances where Daniel Jones was maybe a hair too slow to let go of the ball, or he just didn't seem to trust what he was seeing. There were times when he looked okay, a lot of times when he didn't. And if I am the Giants management, if I'm Joe Schoen, if I'm Brian Daboll, that would be my number one concern with this guy, outside of, the ability to stay on the field healthy. So therefore, that is why I say to you that Daniel Jones, that it would behoove the Giants to have competition, legitimate competition for Daniel Jones. Let the best man win. All right. Now, if it's Tyrod Taylor, then, unfortunately what that means for the Giants is they wasted the sixth overall pick in the draft on a quarterback that is not going to be their future. Chalk it up to another mistake of the Gettleman era. All right. If, however, the presence of Tyrod Taylor motivates Jones even further, and I'm not saying, I know a lot of you have said, well, why does the kid need motivation? Competition never hurt anybody. All right. Let's make that clear. And Jones should not be exempt from competition, in my opinion. So that said, if Tyrod Taylor's presence motivates Jones even further and helps him put it all together, then it will have been money well spent by the Giants, because now they also have peace of mind in knowing that they have a quarterback that could potentially step in if Jones gets injured, or if, God forbid, he struggles or something like that. They also have peace of mind if, they find out that Jones isn't the guy. Now having signed Tyrod Taylor to a 2-year contract, they now have a stopgap for next year when they can go back into the draft class, get a quarterback. The quarterback class is supposed to be better next year, I think, than this year, according to what draft analysts are saying. And it's early still, mind you, but, that's how it's shaping up. So the Giants can go back into the draft and start from scratch, get Brian Daboll the type of quarterback he wants, and just start all over again. All right. So that is kind of where things are at with the addition of Tyrod Taylor. Again, the plan is for Daniel Jones to be quarterback 1, assuming he is healthy. But Tyrod Taylor is more than just an insurance blanket. He is there, if something should go astray or something unexpected should happen, or, disaster should strike. And that's kind of reassuring if you think about it, because again, we know what happened last year, folks. We know the Giants cut corners on the backup quarterback situation, and it was a disaster. Now, is Tyrod Taylor the type of guy who's going to, take you to the playoffs? Well, he did it once before, remember, with Buffalo. Can they win with him? I would think so. They have a better offensive line, because remember, I've always spoken about how the offensive line has to be put in place for the new quarterback to succeed. And the Giants have taken steps to that with the addition of John Feliciano at center and Mark Lewinsky at one of the guards. So we'll talk a little bit more about how the additions, the free agency additions so far, which have all come on the offensive side of the ball, are setting the Giants up for the future, not just this season, but for the draft as well. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, and they taste great. Built Bar offers 9 amazing flavors in nut and nut-free variety, and a rotation of limited time flavor offerings that changes every few weeks. So head on over to BuiltBar.com, check out their current lineup, and put your customized box together today. Use our special promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off your first order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order at BuiltBar.com. All right, Giant fans, I want to talk now a little bit about the free agent moves made so far by the Giants because I've gotten some questions from some of you saying, well, how do you know what they're going to do with the offensive line and so on and so forth? And what does this mean for the draft? So let's talk about that for a little bit. The offensive line, again, I don't have to tell anybody that had to be priority number one. And so far, based on what Joe Schoen has done, he has upgraded that line to an extent where I think it's going to be a much better line. And he hasn't set it up to where the line is going to be hamstrung. In other words, the contracts given to Feliciano at center and Glowinski at guard are not super long-term deals. They're like Feliciano, I think, got 1 year. Glowinski's deal, although it's 3 years, it's technically a 2-year deal given the way it is structured. So that means that the Giants have stopgaps at center and one of the guard positions, which will allow them to take in the draft young players and develop them and start getting that pipeline replenished, which was a mistake, something Dave Gettleman failed to do in his final year as GM with the team. He just didn't have young talent in the pipeline for whatever the reason. I don't know why, but this is something that it looks like Joe Schoen is going to correct moving forward. All right, now let's talk about the positions here. People ask me, well, how do you know for sure that Feliciano is going to be the center? Besides the fact that it was obviously reported. Well, it makes sense, folks, and here's why. Feliciano is coming from Buffalo. All right, he was cut from Buffalo. He knows Dable's system. And as I mentioned in the previous segment, the Giants' offensive system is most likely going to be one that has a very heavy Buffalo flavor to it. So why wouldn't you want a guy who, even though he didn't play center for Buffalo, he was part of that offensive line. He could play center if he needed to. So why wouldn't you want the guy who knows that system inside and out running it? It makes too much sense. And that's why I do believe that Feliciano is going to be the center for 1 year. Now, I also think, and I'll talk about this in just a bit, that still leaves the door open for the Giants to draft a young center. It just kind of takes some of the pressure off to do it right away. All right, now let's talk about the guard situation, and also let's talk about the return of Nick Gates when that happens, and Shane Lemieux when that happens. I mentioned Glowinski's deal. Technically, it is a 3-year deal, but the way it is structured financially, it is a 2-year deal. They can get out of it after 2 years and only have like a $1.5 million dead money hit. All right. The Giants, what they have done, and I put an article on Giants Country about the differences between how the Bills ran their salary cap and how the Giants did it. Shane brought down some of those methods that they used in Buffalo, such as a larger workout bonus per year, such as roster bonuses, smaller signing bonuses. All right. So just to pad up the deal, if you will, how much easier can you make it for a player than to give him a 6-figure workout bonus that requires he be in town anyway, which, he should be doing anyway, and just rewarding him for that. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head what Glowinski's workout bonus is. I want to say it was $300,000. But gosh, that's an easy amount of money to earn for just showing up for 90% or whatever the percentage established is. All right. So these are tactics that Buffalo used in their contracts that now the Giants are starting to use. And that means that now they don't have to give humongous signing bonuses that, are going to choke up the cap if they move on from a contract. So that's smart cap management. All right. So where would Nick Gates, assuming he's healthy, and Shane Lemieux fit in? Well, here's what I think is going to happen. I don't know that Gates is going to be ready this year. I would be very, very surprised if he gets the green light. I think he's going to spend this 2022 season coming up continuing to work to get back outside chance he could be ready, after sitting on PUP for like the first 6 weeks of next season. But I would be shocked if he comes back. I mean, I think he will at some point, but I'd be shocked. This is the final year of Gates' contract, by the way, and I could see them, you know, doing a procedural move where they cut him and then they bring him back once he is able to pass the physical. But right now, I don't see Gates passing a physical. I see Gates, if he is still on the roster, opening training camp on the PUP list, starting the regular season on the PUP list. And as you guys know, the difference between the regular season PUP and the training camp PUP is in training camp, you are considered active PUP, which means you count against the 90-man roster. During the season, if you are still on the PUP, you become inactive PUP, which means you do not count against the roster, but you have to sit out for 6 weeks. All right, so that's the difference there. And also, while on the subject of PUP, I get this question a lot. If a player passes a physical and that gets injured, you can't put him on PUP. Once he passes the physical, PUP is closed for the year to that guy. So just something to tuck away for later. All right, so when Gates does come back, and I say when because if anybody's going to come back from something like this, it's going to be him. His best fit is going to be at guard. All right, I have always thought that he is a better guard than he is center. And in fact, I've spoken to him in the past. I spoke to him a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2019, before they closed down the locker room due to COVID. And Gates seemed to indicate that he would, if given his druthers, he would rather play guard. So to me, it makes sense that you have Glowinski, who is a pretty good run blocker and who is an iffy type of pass blocker. All right. Then you have Feliciano at your center, who's going to run that, run the line calls and whatnot. And then you put Shane Lemieux or a draft pick to compete for the other guard spot. All right. Now, at tackle, you've already signed Matt Gano. All right. Gano, I don't think they signed him with the idea of making him the starter. I think he's going to maybe be the swing tackle. Luck, fingers crossed that this happens, and luck brings you one of Ike Ekwonu or Evan Neal at number 5. If one of those guys are there, boom, you run that card up to the podium. Your right tackle position now is solved. Now, here's the thing that I'm wondering. Ike Ekwonu has primarily been a left tackle. Evan Neal, while he has had more snaps at left tackle, according to Pro Football Focus, he's had over 1,000 snaps at left tackle, 1,094 snaps to be exact. But he's also had 765 snaps in his college career, 3-year career at Alabama, at right tackle. So if you have a choice between Ekwonu and Neal, I can't help but wonder, as much as I would like Ekwonu, at that point, do you say, oh, we're going to shift him over now to a position that he didn't really play in college? Or do you say, okay, we're going to go with Evan Neal because he's already had experience at right tackle? I would think if you have the 5th overall pick in the draft, you don't want to necessarily move that guy if you can help it to a different position or to a different side in the case of an offensive lineman. So that would be an interesting scenario. Now, I don't think that both guys will fall to the Giants at number 5. I'd be surprised. But I'd be curious to see if one of them falls, would the Giants run the card up to him, up to the commissioner? I think they would. You can't go wrong with either one of those guys. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's what we're looking at the starting offensive line. I don't think they would move Andrew Thomas, who's starting to come into his own at left tackle. Doesn't make sense to move him. I don't think it does. So that's what we're looking at as far as the starting offensive line. Now, what are we looking at as far as the backups and the future of the offensive line? Well, listen. There have been people who have written to me and said, I want Tyler Linderbaum at number 7. I want this guy, I want 2 offensive linemen at 5 and 7. What the Giants have done in free agency now is they've taken some of the onus off to where they don't have to go offensive line in 2 of the 3 first picks. This is a deep class, remember. Okay? So they can, like I said, if Ekwonu is there or Neal is there at 5, you take them. But now for pick number 7 and then your first pick in the second round, you don't necessarily have to, force a pick at offensive line if the value isn't there. You can go defense, you can go tight end if you want. You could go any number of directions. All right. So I think what the Giants are going to probably do, and what I would do, is I would look to get at least 2, if not 3 offensive linemen in the draft. 2 of the guys, I would think I would want to have as depth to be developed. All right. So I would maybe look at them, one guy maybe day 2, one guy maybe day 3. And then I would also look to pick up undrafted free agents that I could see whether or not I would develop them, if they could be developed, I should say, into future, starters when guys move on. So that's how I would see it kind of playing out for the Giants. I think, the moves that they've made, they've set themselves up nicely to where they don't have to force anything. Now, you'll notice that as of this recording, the Giants have not done anything on the defensive side of the ball. Does that necessarily mean that the draft is going to be defensive heavy? Could very well be. So let's talk about this for a second. The Giants still have to do something with James Bradberry, which they have not done as of this recording. And I'm recording this Tuesday night for those of you who wanted a time reference. So they have to do something with James Bradberry. I do think they're going to trade him. I know right now there's not a big market for him, but as I've noted, they've got time on their side. Now, could they conceivably get something done by 4 o'clock on Wednesday so that they beat the deadline and don't have to pay Bradberry the $2 million guaranteed money that kicks in on the 17th? They could. But here's the thing. Even if Bradberry is still on their roster come the 17th, they could still trade him like next week or whenever, next month. And the team that acquires him will now pick up the $2 million that is guaranteed. That is not going to hit the Giants' book. The only money that's going to hit the Giants' book is going to be the prorated signing bonus. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why I keep saying that the Giants have time on their side. And they probably don't want to, rush it to where they're not going to get a guy, they're not going to get good value for him. Now, when I talk about good value, ideally, you've got to think of, okay, what kind of comp pick would I get for Bradberry if I were to let him walk away? And you would think a player of his caliber would draw at least a 3rd rounder. All right. So if you're the Giants and you're getting offers for 6th and 7th round picks, you don't take them. And I know you're probably saying to yourself, well, beggars can't be choosy, but I'm sorry, you want equivalent value for what you're trading away. You don't want to get fleeced. So if you know you're going to get a better draft pick, a better comp pick or something, if you hold on to the guy, because remember, Bradberry has a avoidable year in his contract, you do it. I mean, it makes sense. Now, worst case scenario, what you try and do is you try and lower Bradberry's base salary to give yourself some cap space. All right. That's the other thing. People say, oh my God, the Giants need the cap space. Well, if they're not going crazy in free agency, which it looks like they're not, they can afford to wait because they're going to need about 12 to 13 million to sign their draft class. So even if they, let's say, for argument's sake, they cut Bradberry from the roster, which I don't think they're going to do, but let's say they have no takers and they say, you know what, we're going to cut him. So then what they could do is they could designate him a post-June 1st cut. They will save, I think, a little bit more. I think their savings will go up to 13 million, and that will cover what they need to sign the draft class. So they do have options when it comes to Bradberry. Now, that being said, there could be something that goes down today. We'll have to see what Joe Shane does. But that's how I kind of see that playing out. But anyway, speaking of the defense, getting back to the defense, the Giants are getting back Blake Martinez. off the torn ACL. So we'll see how he is in terms of his speed. And by the way, the Giants are supposed to have an extra mini camp this year. You know, all new head coaches get an extra mini camp according to the NFL rules. So I believe the Giants are going to have one in April. I'm not sure when, but I think one's coming up. So we'll see if Blake Martinez, he probably won't be cleared if he's there. You know, he'll probably show up, but he won't be cleared to do anything. But he'll be somebody you want to keep an eye on physically, you know, as we go on through the summer, you know, the spring and the summer. You know, you're going to want to see what Wink Martindale is going to do with his defense, you know, what's missing. And I've got to think, you know, the Giants are going to want to do an extra cornerback. They might want to grab an extra safety because I do not think Logan Ryan and Julian Love are going to be on this team beyond this year. You definitely need help on the defensive line after the Giants lost Austin Johnson to the Chargers. So the Giants are going to have to do some work on the defensive side of the ball, no question. Whether they wait until the second wave of free agency, which is going to start in a couple of days, or whether they just say, you know what, we're going to devote most of our draft to that second wave, that remains to be seen. And, you know, the only other position really that the Giants need to add is a tight end, because now they don't have any other of their three tight ends from last year, Evan Ingram having gone to Jacksonville on a one-year deal. So that's kind of where things are with the Giants after 2 days of pre-free agency, we'll call it. The official start of free agency, again, starts Wednesday at noon Eastern time. So in advance, you know, depending on when you're watching this, let me wish you a happy new NFL year. It's a new league year. Plenty more coming up on the podcast, obviously. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to run the mailbag. Like I said, it's ready to go. Just haven't had a chance to run it because of the breaking news. So I do have it ready to go. I have other features that I'm planning for you guys. I'm hoping to get an interview or two in. So stick with me here at the Locked On Giants podcast, and I'll bring you all things Giants as always. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Until next time, this is Patricia Traina. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day or your first watch of the day. Have a great one, everybody.